many of you know that we have 5 grandchildren. 5 grandchildren that have all unique and very different personalities. So I want to share a little bit this morning about our Hadley. Hadley is the youngest of the 5, and she has 2 stair-step brothers that are very close in age with her. And I think one of their causes in life is to aggravate her. And she has a pretty easygoing temperament. She likes to hang out with her mom, she likes to play, and she does not want the boys to bother her. But when it gets to be too much, you just know it. I can see that look that comes over her face. And then I can watch her little hands become fist. And then just watch out. Just anger. I know that at the moment she is just totally frustrated. It isn't that she's necessarily raging because of nothing, but she is just tired of them bothering her, and she is going to tell them. You know, sometimes I think life gets to us in the same way. Becomes too much. The sadness wells up in us, the frustration, and our hands become clenched and our jaws become clenched, and the anger comes out. Today we're going to continue on our series about lamentations. And today we're going to talk about lamentations and anger. Will you pray with me, please? God, I just ask that you help me, your servant, to speak a word that brings honor to you. Amen. When Hadley gets so frustrated, what happens is she's crying, but they're not tears of sadness, but they're angry tears. Now, angry tears might seem like a bit of an oxymoron, yet there are probably moments in all of our lives in which we get to the point in which we have such mixed emotions. Psychologists tell us that anger and sadness actually have an alliance with each other. One emotion often stands in for the other when the situation becomes threatening. What often happens is we react to the negative things that happen in our lives with both anger and sadness. We get the tension between the two of them, and it allows us to work through life's obstacles. Sometimes they happen simultaneously, so we find ourselves crying and being angry at the exact same moment. And sometimes they take 2 different courses. So why are there so many situations in life that create angry tears? I was kind of contemplating that this week, and I thought one poet put it, I believe, the best way. He said, "We are created to live in God's garden, yet we wake up every morning in the desert of our fallen world." Things make us sad. Things create our lament and our anger here on this earth because we're not in heaven yet. We live in a world where things are constantly going wrong. People die too young. Injustices surround us. Friends are unkind, and work is too hard. And then there are the moments in which all of this culminates together, and life is just too much. Who of us sitting here this morning has not felt Like there are moments in our life where we just feel a mess, where we're sad, confused. What happens is that sadness overwhelms us in a way that we are immobilized. We're not able to move out of our own way, and so we become angry at our situation. We become depressed. We become angry at others because we believe that they should have done more for us. We look and we feel betrayed by friends. We're mad at enemies. We're tired of illnesses. And we're wondering, where is God in all of this mess? Our problems are many. For some, it is facing death. The death of a loved one, maybe even concerns about our own death. For others, it's losing a job or facing the unknown of retirement. Or maybe it's looking at the gross iniquities of life and just questioning why. And in the midst of this, we Christians have an added pain because we believe that we have a God who could make this all go away. And so, like the psalmist, we cry out, why? Why? Where are you, God, in the midst of this? I don't know if you've ever heard of St. Teresa of Avila. If you, I would suggest that you Google her because she has amazing wisdom. And she wrote that it is blessed to be a disciple of Christ. But at a particularly weak moment for herself, and she knew for others, she questioned. And she cried out to God in the sky and said, if this is the way that you treat your friends, then I guess that's why you have so few. We believers in Jesus sometimes question, if I am a friend of God, why is this happening to me? We say this in our brokenness, in our darkness, and in our sorrow. So this morning, I just want to real briefly look at the sadness that leads to anger. Sadness and brokenness that leads to anger at ourselves, leads to anger at others, and leads to anger at God. Let me first state that there are many situations in life that demand a response of anger. And it can be quite healthy and productive in these cases to be angry. Anger itself is not sin. Bitterness, rage, and violence that sometimes come out of anger, yes, they are sins. But anger alone is not sinful. The Bible has plenty of examples of both righteous anger that leads to change, as well as inappropriate anger. But probably of all the emotions in life, anger is the one that most strongly affects change and creates a catalyst for change. When we feel angry, we are usually quite motivated to then do something different about it. We become driven and focused. When Hadley gets angry, she lets her siblings know that enough is enough. Being angry at the injustices that surround us in the world actually have been the ways in which those injustices have been righted. But anger that is masking our pain, that isn't necessarily healthy. What happens is it's much easier to be angry than to face the situation which is creating us pain and difficulty. Sharing our pain can be difficult. And so what happens is we choose to default to emotion that we believe is better to handle our sadness. We kind of play a trick on ourselves. We kind of convince ourselves that, we don't want people to know how sad we are. So we're just going to get angry at the whole world and push people away. I know I find myself doing that. We know that pain when we feel kind of the stinging of tears, that point that you just don't want to cry, and yet you are so afraid that you're going to cry. That moment in which anger wells up at you when you are being criticized, but it is instead deep and profound sadness. Those tears of anger when we're being let go from a job, or maybe when we're being told something that is just too difficult to face. What happens is we displace, for our own protection, our sadness with anger. Even though that's kind of a natural reaction, it can be self-defeating. You see, is we don't want to be vulnerable. We don't want to expose ourselves. We don't want to cry. We don't want people to feel sorry for us. That isn't what we want. But in some way, we can explain that we want people's understanding and compassion and not their pity. And so what happens is we become angry. It's easy to dismiss our anger, that it's something that everybody gets mad and we just need to buck up and face it. But I'm going to ask you today to really consider your anger and to consider the places that it might be coming from. And I'm going to challenge you to not allow it to fester so that it becomes bitterness and rage, but to go and to seek out help. Because when we have a deep hurt, deep enough that it is creating anger in us, we require to give it our full attention. So when was the last time you were angry? Did you take the time to really think about what was making you angry? What was behind it? Anger unmanaged or pushed aside becomes bitterness. Psychology today defines bitterness as a chronic and pervasive state of smoldering resentment. And it is the most destructive and toxic of human emotions. One of the easiest ways to destroy ourselves is to allow anger to fester in our lives. Anger that melts into tears can be addressed and it can be used for a catalyst for change. However, if you are angry all the time, that ceases to be healthy. That becomes bitterness. So I encourage you, seek out counseling. If you need a place to begin, then I'm happy to begin to start to talk to you and direct you to someone who you can continue the conversation with. But don't allow anger to be an acid that destroys your life. We all know, or possibly you know, the story of King Saul in the Bible. Saul was one of the chosen, and he was the second king in the Bible. But Saul was so jealous of the young David that he allowed that jealousy to destroy him. And it led to the destruction of not just him, but the destruction of his family, and nearly the destruction of Israel. And bitterness and anger led to Judas to betray Jesus. And so we can see how destructive bitterness can be in our life. Or you might say, well, I'm not angry, or my anger is only at myself. I read kind of like this weird, interesting fact. And it said when a rattlesnake gets cornered, sometimes it becomes so angry that it bites itself. And I thought that is really kind of an explanation of what happens to us when we get so angry at ourselves. We blame ourselves for things, and we punish ourselves. And we often do that not about things that we have any control over, but instead we blame ourselves for natural occurrences in life. Is there anyone here that has a perfection problem besides myself? Perfectionism leads to bitterness and anger. Perfectionism is wanting something that we can never achieve because the only thing that is perfect in life is God. Anger that is turned inward turns into anxiety and fear and depression. Instead of letting the darkness of anger take control of our situations, it's really important for us to kind of get a perspective of why we're angry at ourselves in the first place. And again, this often needs to happen in conversations with other people because we can't stand outside of ourselves to look at ourselves objectively. Another weird fact. Did you ever wonder where the saying flying off the handle came from? You know, when you get too angry, you say she's just flying off the handle, right? Well, actually, in the pioneer days in America, axes were often handmade. Men on the frontier would carve down their own handles to fit the axe head when they were moving west. Now, usually, the fit was not a good one. And so when they were doing their work, what would happen? The axe would fly off the handle. Now, usually, it didn't fly off the handle in the down, laying on the ground mode. It happened when it was in motion, right? And so it could create danger for the people around. In our anger, when we fly off the handle, we are creating danger for the people around us. We may not be able to fully express how we feel when tough situations happen in our life. We may not fully have the words to share our brokenness and our sadness about the death of a loved one. However, we can articulate feelings about an incompetent doctor or an unhelpful insurance agent. Our hurt feelings about being laid off can also turn into resentment and bitterness toward those who got to keep their jobs. Or bad behavior by a religious parent is so often what leads people into painting all Christians as frauds. What happens is when we are angry at others, it often becomes an epidemic because it spreads beyond the immediate situation in which we're angry to all of those that are around us. Most often, those we love the most. Life is unfair. Again, we're not in the Garden of Paradise. People will treat one another badly. There will be injustices that occur. When I'm angry, often the people who get hit by that anger are not the ones that were the source of my pain. And then there's anger at God. You know, we live in a society that very easily allows people to get angry. We have television shows, we have movies, we have radio shows in which people spend a lot of time raging and complaining about life's unfairness. But when it comes to getting angry at God, a lot of us are kind of lost as to what do we do. Well, the one thing is if you are angry at God, and we believe that God is all-knowing, then probably God knows we're angry, right? So we're not keeping anything from God by not telling God that we're angry. So there's first the understanding that God already knows how you feel and why you feel that way. Perhaps it's the intensity of being angry at God that actually scares us. But I want you, and I'm inviting you to admit your anger. Because I don't think that moves us farther away from God. But I actually believe that admitting it moves us closer. Because it shows that we are dependent on God and that we desire a whole and healthy relationship. If we stand in the corner and just remain angry, it doesn't move toward healing. I think one of the best examples of anger at God is Lieutenant Dan from Forrest Gump. Does everybody know kind of what I'm talking about, Lieutenant Dan? Lieutenant Dan, the Vietnam soldier who so desired in his kind of warped sense of justice that he would die for his country. But instead, he finds himself a double amputee. And he's lost, and he's frustrated, and he is angry. He's angry at himself for not fully doing the deed like he expected he should and die for his country. He's angry at his fellow soldiers for not allowing him to die. And he is angry at God. He uses and he displays this anger through his becoming addicted, being abusive, and he's often making sharp little comments about people who believe. And then one night, on a ship, on the mast of the ship, strapped on in the midst of the hurricane, he lets out all that he feels and all of his uncomfortableness and all of his anger, including at God. And as the morning comes, and he's let go, and he's found out that God has not smited him or knocked him dead, the healing process begins. Hopefully, to let go of and allow God to know that you are angry does not require strapping you on the mast of a ship. If it's necessary, maybe we can arrange to do so. I see that you can rent a sailboat in Belmar for $100 a night. But sometimes it does require the dark night for us to really get to the place that we are like the psalmist and cry out, "Why, God, why?" But then, once you cry out, then it is our responsibility to listen to the answer that God provides. For Lieutenant Dan, he makes it through the night, and in the morning the sun shines. God offers us that same opportunity to move through our anger and to move to a place of peace. That even though the things that create our sadness, that lead to the anger, have not changed, the desire that we have to change is the difference. And in those moments, we can begin to take the steps to healing. If your pain has moved you beyond tears to anger, then I want to leave you with this morning. It is really important that you begin to seek help. Seek help first through prayer. Use the Psalms to cry out to God if you don't have words. Seek help through those who love you and just admit your pain. And then seek help so that you can move toward a direction of healing. In closing, I'd like to leave you with a blessing based on Psalm 37. Trust in God and do what is good. Live with quiet confidence where God has placed you. Delight in God's presence, and you will have your heart's desires. Commit everything you do to God and completely trust Him, and He will not let you down. Be patient. Don't worry or get distressed when things don't go well. Instead, learn to rest in God's presence. For those who trust in God will have everything that they need.